Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for getting up early and showing up for us. My name is Christine Olmsted. I am the Managing Director of Corporate Development for Synechron. And for those of you who don't know Synechron, we're a 25-year-old global tech consulting and services company. And we do a series like this. We started this series about a year ago, and we'll talk a little bit about what that series is. But I get the pleasure of hosting this. I happen to be an ex-journalist. I started my career as a journalist in New York City, and I used to interview celebrities. And so this is my way of getting to be a journalist again. It's fantastic. We have a fast, I think, hour or thereabouts of discussion for you guys today, some meaty topics. But before we dive into the content, I'd like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Trina.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Hi, everyone. My name is Trina O'Keefe. I work here at London Stock Exchange Group, and I'm the Chief Information Officer for our data and analytics business. And I'm super excited to be here today. I'm sad for Christine that I'm not a celebrity, but I'll do my best to perform to her journalistic standards. This is a subject really close to my heart, so really happy to spend time talking about it today. Thank you.
Janet?
Thank you. Morning all. Janet Jones. I'm the Global Director at ServiceNow, looking after HSBC, so I have the privilege of really working in the intersection between banking, data, and real-life decisions. So, you know, making sure that women in the room is a big passion of mine in any aspect of that. So, look, great to be here, and really pleased to see so many of you here as well.
And the last time I saw JJ was Vegas. We were in Vegas last week together, and as I say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But when I saw her picture on this...
That's one for after.
Yeah, exactly. But when I saw her picture on this slide, I thought, oh, it looks like we go eyeglass shopping together.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Peter, you're next.
Good morning, Peter Jackson, Global Head of Schroders Data Office. I've been there 18 months to set up the global function for data across Schroders. Prior to that, I spent 2.5 years as an AI startup in West London, which was fascinating. Startup to corporate, and before that I was Group Director of Data Science at Legal & General and CDO of the Elgin business. Interesting, over 5 years, I think that role at Legal & General will be now called Group Director of AI.
Yeah.
So Gavin Smythe, I work here at London Stock Exchange Group, Head of Shared Services in the Markets Division. I've been with the organisation for about 20 years. Topic very close to my heart. I've got 2 daughters, and so you know, very passionate about that they get all of the opportunities that I've had in my career as they kind of think about what they want to do.
Terrific, thank you. So, as I said, this is a series for Synechron. We're also partnering this time with London Stock Exchange Group, and I think all of us are pretty passionate. Both organizations are pretty passionate about the sort of collection of efforts to help increase the percentage of women in our tech and banking workforce. And I think as we think about that problem and as we think about how we could solve it together, we'll kind of touch on, does AI, does data make a difference in that journey? Is this the time where we can really turn up the volume on getting more women into our workforces? So that's where the discussion will go today. I'll take some questions from the audience. At some point, we've got some questions prepared. Before we do that, though, I want to show just a short video about what EmpowHer is. So if we could roll the video, please.
Welcome to EmpowHer, driven by Synechron Women's ERG. This initiative began with a simple idea: to make space for women to lead, speak, and connect. Across regions, across borders, and one global community. A community that welcomes all voices, genders, and drives collective progress. We are EmpowHer.
Terrific. Okay. So what you guys are going to learn in this conversation is that these aren't softball questions, right? These guys have prepared some answers. They've seen the questions, but it's a conversation. And I think any change has to start with just being honest about where we're starting from, right? And so if my first question sort of says, let's level set on where we are today. So 20% of the tech workforce today in this country is female, 20%. And it hasn't changed much, or I think it's 22% if I'm going to be precise. Hasn't changed much in the last few years. So I think as as we face the upheaval that's coming with AI, I guess I'd say, do you think there's a silver lining with regard to improving the gender balance? Is AI gonna tip the balance faster for us? And let's start, and you dive in. Whoever wants to go first, please go for it.
I think it will.
There you go.
I think it will, because I think that AI is a different sort of conversation than talking about technology or data, which, I know, I've got 4 daughters as they came up through school. They didn't want to do technology A-levels. It was seen as a male thing, a boy thing. But I think the whole conversation around AI is actually making it kind of gender neutral. It is more appealing to more people.
I think there's definitely some green shoots, actually. If you look at kind of participation in STEM subjects, but particularly in computer science, then you're seeing significant growth in the number of females now deciding to take routes through, kind of traditional routes through university from that perspective. But I think also the fact that AI is such a disruptive force at the moment, it actually means that there's a real opportunity there to reshape kind of the workforce and how we're thinking about digital skills. It's not going to happen automatically. It definitely needs organisations to really consider how they approach it and the skills gaps that we have, both in the industry and kind of nationally in the UK. But yeah, there's definitely an opportunity there because change is happening regardless.
I think about it in the context of, the barriers to entry, and you talked around it historically being less attractive to go into a technical role, but actually I think those barriers to entry are evolving. I've had a squiggly career, as they call it. I'm a banker by background, moved into technology via certain paths, and I think that's the interesting point, is that AI is taking away, the need for you to have followed that very traditional, I've studied this, now I'm doing this, now I'm doing this. I think the other thing to consider is actually when we say, increasing women in AI and playing a leadership role, what do we actually mean by that? What roles do we want women to play in the breadth of what goes into, that as a technology and as a disruptive force?
Mm-hmm. So I've been working in technology and finance for 30-something years, and it frustrates me enormously that number has not really moved on in that time. And I look at it from a kind of, I guess, a data perspective. Iceland's equivalent number is 45%. That tells you something, right? It's not very far away, right? It's not a capability issue that prevents us from having more women in technology roles, in my opinion. It's a set of reasons, and Janet and Peter and Gavin have touched on a number of them. And I do have a lot of hope that the advent of AI, where deep fluency, for example, in programming languages becomes less of a requirement because the AI can code it for you. I actually wrote my first code using GitHub Copilot yesterday. I'm like riding this AI wave at the moment. So I do think that's going to help, because I think it broadens out potentially more attractive options that women may think, oh, I'd like to do that. But just to kind of, I guess, present the kind of the balance view, I also think there's a risk around what it means for people entering into the technology workforce. And I think we're going to have to think really hard about, for women and for men, about how we make sure that there are still junior career paths that have value, because you still need, no matter how good the AI gets, you still need people who really understand how to engineer durable, lasting, high-quality solutions. And we have to have development paths for those. And I think historically, women have done okay at the numbers we see. Women do okay at the entry level, and then they start to kind of fall away as they get more senior. And I think we really need to focus in on what that looks like in this new world that we're in now.
Okay, so I want to kind of start macro, and we'll get a little bit more personal toward the end. So I read a book called Nexus over the Christmas holiday. Heavy reading for Christmas, but anybody read the book Nexus? No. So it says that in this AI revolution that we're in, 70% of the gain, the economic gain, is going to go to two countries, the US and China, right? And the rest of the countries are going to be scrapping over the rest. That scares me as somebody who lives in this country. And I wonder, as leaders in the UK, how might we help close that digital skill gap so it is more balanced as we head into the next few years?
I don't think there's any sort of magic answer, but I think it's a combination of a number of the things that are already talked around in terms of really opening up or enforcing or thinking about how we can really extend digital literacy. You know, we talk about it in the financial industry around financial literacy. These things on a wider societal basis are an absolute imperative. So we need, you know, governmental incentives, large corporate incentives to really ensure that we get that out on a much more widespread basis.
Gavin?
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of it is about trying to address the digital skills gap that we have as a country, and I think we are making steps towards that, whether it's starting earlier in schools with coding, etc. I mean, my two daughters have both done coding from, you know, kind of 8, 9 years old in school, which is fantastic. I mean, when I was going through school, didn't do any coding. It was at university once I decided to go down a computing route that I first started. So starting earlier is much better. That takes a long time to filter through the system, though. And, you know, realistically, we've probably only got, you know, 5, 10 years to try and address that gap, or else it's going to be really hard to close. I think the skills that we need are changing. You know, to the point in the previous question, it's going to be a lot more about how do we interact with AI, how do we utilize AI, and how do we consume it. But I think as a nation, we also need to think about, are we just going to be a consumer of it, or are we going to actually have the capability to further it as well, and become a, you know, an exporter of, you know, AI skills and technology skills. So I think there's definitely, we need to move very quickly as organisations. We need to look beyond the traditional routes in terms of just university routes in. So whether it's apprentice programs, you know, really kind of look for the skills where they are, and kind of broaden our perspective a bit from that.
You made a point, though, that I think leads into the next question I want to ask, but you talked about your daughters learning early. And I think I've read loads of times the way to increase women in the tech workforce is to start young, start with the kids, right? And catch them and hook them when they're younger, bring them up in through the ranks. I'm curious what your organizations are doing to help on that journey. And maybe you can talk about what ServiceNow is doing, Schroders doing, LSEG's doing. Sure. Peter, you want to start?
There are a couple of things I want to pick up on first.
Please.
I think the first is, I think that the economic benefits, 70% going to China and to the USA, may be an awful lot to do with the rare earths and chip production, rather than benefiting the actual organisations across, you know, the FTSE 250, say. I think the other thing about skills, AI challenges the digital skills gap. To me, I think it's the data skills gap, people understanding how data works and the importance of data to AI. But I think the interesting skills gap is around people who can actually see the application of AI to transform businesses. And it's the people who can understand how AI can change business processes to make them fundamentally more efficient, to make them more capable of rapid scaling and growth. I think that's where the skills gap is, and I don't think that is necessarily a tech skill. I don't think it's a data skill, a coding skill. I think it's smarts, and I think that a lot of people, it'll be controversial, we're all quite old and senior, I think we can't often see it, and I think it is the younger people who can actually look at something and say, why did you do it that way?
Yeah.
And I think that is where I'm seeing an interesting skills gap. So what we're doing at Schroders is we're not encouraging people to learn coding. We have intern programs, we have graduate programs, things like that. But what we're supporting is people in transformation teams, transformation programs, to say, right, when you're looking at this transformation program next year, question anything that's got a spreadsheet in it. Surely that's agentic AI. Anything that's got a spreadsheet in it, anything that's coming out to Power BI, surely you should be using Cortex or Claude or something like that. And so I think it's challenging the thinking, and that's where I think the interesting skills are.
And empowering those young people
to
be okay
absolutely.
to challenge.
We don't have the answers.
Well, we might. Fair point. How about you, ServiceNow? What are you guys doing to drive change?
So, I mean, we're doing, I guess, all of the things you'd expect in terms of industry partnerships. We're encouraging girls into code, women into code, minority groups into coding, you know, really thinking about how we attract a more diverse workforce. And then I think, you know, there is a piece, and I like the point you make, around actually thinking more broadly around how we attract people into different roles, but also how we extract that different thinking for the benefit of the organisation.
So I'm thinking about, how do you extract it? How do we codify that behavior?
I think it comes from leadership and really making people feel empowered, but also there's a piece around enabling people to have that voice, but also to fail fast and not making that something that people feel fear around. So, you know, actually thinking about how you do things differently and coming up with those different ideas, like you say. We're not all, you know, that sort of historic thing of, actually, I'm the boss, we're going to decide how things are done. It's really flipping that on its head.
I had that happen to me yesterday. Somebody on my team said, oh, I did this, and I thought, oh, that's not how I asked her to do it, but it's actually better than how I asked her to do it. And back away and say, good on you, keep going. Yeah. Fantastic. How about LSEG? What are you guys doing?
Do you want to go, Kevin? Or,
sure.
So I can. We do quite a number of things that Janet already kind of touched on. One of the things I love that we do in relation to kind of STEM generally is a lot of volunteering. We have fantastic cohort of volunteers. I see a number of them in the room here. So we kind of work in the communities that we're in and do things locally. You know, that could be anything from schools programs to bringing in graduates and letting them sort of experience our environment. For example, we run programs for students in the summer. We do a lot of different things. Actually, something I was involved in yesterday is with our new graduate intake, we've appointed 10 reverse AI mentors. So they've been partnered with our executive committee. We had a big kind of leadership day yesterday, and they were all there. There were 10 of them, and 7 of them were women. I was like so inspired by meeting them and what they were able to do. So we did try and do a lot of those kind of practical things. But it's never enough, right? That's the thing. It's never enough. And one of the things I've been thinking about more recently, and I probably need to think about how to do something about, a friend of mine who works in a university said that for entry into their kind of STEM courses, they found that they got more benefit from targeting parents and educators than they did from targeting the kids directly. And I found that really interesting because I'd never really thought about that angle before, because actually for a lot of kids, their influence is what they hear from their teachers at school, or it's what they hear from their parents. Well, not in my teenager's case, but you know, you have to keep trying. And so I do think there's an angle there on parents and educators that we can probably do something more on that we haven't thought about already. And I think the more as well that firms encourage volunteering work, we encourage everyone to spend 2 days a year volunteering, and a lot of people spend that on STEM-related activities. You know, super supportive of that. Gavin, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I guess from the perspective of once you're in the organisation as well, actually, the adoption of AI is probably one of the biggest levelers that has come through, because, you know, for everyone that's been in industry for some time, we're having to learn it at the same time as everyone else. Mm-hmm. And in fact, you know, those coming in at the start of their careers have probably got the advantage because they haven't got the preconceived notions of how we should do things because it's the way we've always done it. So, you know, from that perspective, I think, you know, initiatives like the reverse mentoring, things like that, you know, it's early days, we're just kicking that off, but I think it's an absolutely fantastic initiative to really try and educate at a senior level, you know, the opportunities that AI, et cetera, brings.
Yeah, there was such a buzz in the room yesterday with people going, "Oh, I didn't know I could do that." That people were using Copilot, ChatGPT. They were building agents. You know, they were using the command line interface on GitHub Copilot. It was like these were non-engineering people. It was really, really exciting. Yeah, to see.
I just a plug out there to anybody in the audience who's Synechron. I need one of these reverse mentors, please. So find me somebody who can teach it to me. It's sort of a related point. I think we've heard that not only is it sort of a generational thing, but it's also a departmental thing. So we in our organizations have gotten quite structured. Most big companies have organizations, and you get kind of locked into your lane. The thought is that because it's so disruptive, AI and kind of the data revolution is breaking down barriers between departments, between business and tech, for example, and causing more collaboration in a way that's lighting up lots of our organizations in new ways. Are you guys seeing that? And do you buy into that theory?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're taking very much sort of a data product approach, and data products span the whole business, go across the business.
Yeah.
And therefore you end up with people from technology, transformation, subject matter experts, product specialists, tech, data scientists, grouped around products. So yeah, it is, I think, I see data is causing that breakdown of the barriers.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, in across financial services, we see that as well. And I think, you know, it already started because of the pervasiveness of technology in our day-to-day lives. So, you know, you go back however long, and, you know, technology was something that was done to people. That evolved, you know, as we all had it in our personal lives. And actually, the disparity between what we're getting delivered in our organisations and what we expected at home, you know, organisations have had to work hard to bridge that gap. But actually, AI is taking it a further level in terms of exactly as you say, you know, the ability to say, actually, this is what we need, and to drive it and make it happen is a cross-departmental thing now.
Yeah, and I just follow on that point from Janet. I think the focus shifts from the kind of how do you implement it to how do you really specify it. That it's almost a level of abstraction where the kind of all the secret sauce is in the how do you tell it what you want it to do. And that is something where I think the combined skills, and it's back to the point Peter made earlier, this isn't about building little point solutions. This is about re-engineering end-to-end processes. And you can't do that with just one set of skills. And I think it's that combination that I think is super, super powerful. I heard an example recently. I won't attribute it because it might be, I don't know, confidential. But I heard about a team that built something in, 60 days that would typically have taken them, a year plus. And not only that, their velocity then subsequently increased such that they're now going too fast for the ideas. Like, the ideas aren't coming fast enough for them to implement. And so that in itself, I find super exciting. That's a very high quality problem to have if you can deliver value. And that's why I'm not as concerned about the point you touched on earlier around where will the value from all this kind of, come out in the economy, because I think there's probably huge GDP uplift that can come from being able to generate that level of pace.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, because actually some of the headlines are that a lot of corporates at an organisational level are struggling to see that ROI on AI yet. Mm-hmm. But I'd agree with you. What I see in terms of day-to-day role within ServiceNow and also within the organisations that we work with, I agree we're starting to see some real evolution in terms of the pace at which people are seeing the benefit.
Excellent. So on that point, I have three teenagers, teenage boys. Wish me luck.
Good luck.
But I read recently that the jobs they will do in a handful of years' time don't even exist today. And I don't know if that's a good thing, or I have to say for my eldest, it's kind of scary. He doesn't really know. He's in university and what's going to happen. Do you guys buy into that? Do you think it's going to change us that radically in the next few years, or is that hype?
I think it is going to change that radically. Just saying to JJ before, my first degree is in geography, second in geopolitics of the Middle East, before the internet had been invented. So even in my lifetime, I'm doing a job that hadn't even been conceived of when I left university in 1986. And I think we've just seen things get faster and faster and faster and faster. When my son went to Edinburgh to read computer science. He looked at the 4-year course. He said, there's blanks for year 3 and 4. And they said, well, we don't know what it's going to be yet.
That's cool. I like that.
So I think that my advice to any young people is get a good education, be multi-skilled, and be inquiring. Just keep asking questions. The best data scientist who ever worked for me had a first-class degree in philosophy from Warwick University, and he just couldn't stop asking questions.
Yeah. Curiosity is key. Yeah, I like that. Gavin, what's your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is a reality. Things are changing extremely quickly, and you know, we're probably going to see a bit more of an exponential curve as organisations become clearer in terms of where they're going to use AI, the benefits that they're going to get from it, etc. You know, there's a big focus, obviously, at the moment about increasing efficiency in the jobs that you do, but then, you know, that's going to grow into how we utilise AI in product development, in etc. etc. So jobs are going to change. The more kind of menial tasks are going to get hoovered up by the technology very quickly. That's going to impact a lot of routes into organisations because, you know, it's a starting point that most of us probably went through. So yeah, things are going to change very quickly. I mean, going back to, I don't think it's necessarily just about that route in. It's about the attitude to learning. It's about the, you know, being inquisitive and being open to, you know, just throwing yourself into things. I think. Yeah, that's not going to change.
It's my youngest. I had this conversation with my two younger boys on the weekend, and he said, "Make sure you tell them, by the way, that he's gonna be in the NBA. So he doesn't need this whole data and AI thing. He's going to be playing basketball in the NBA. So now you know." All right. So let's bring it back to women, and let's sort of shift to a little bit later stage. So not entering the workforce, but sort of sustaining a career in it. Research shows, and there's quite a lot of this research out there, that women leave tech at a much higher rate than men, often because our progression is limited for various reasons, usually lack of sponsorship. So from your experience, what practical changes could leaders or allies, men in this case, make to reverse the trend?
Can I chip in there? This is a subject that I feel very strongly about, and I guess is very kind of personal to me. So like that thing around women leave because of insufficient progression, often, as you said, due to lack of sponsorship. I really believe that. I saw a study that was done on that a few years ago, and people expected the study to show something else. They expected it to show about, you know, women trying to deal with work-life balance, etc. It was completely the opposite. It was, I want more, and I'm not getting more where I am, and so I'm going to choose something different. That same study also showed that that women typically take like 2 years to leave once they decide they're going to leave. Men tend to leave more quickly when they decide to leave. So there's actually a lot of time for people to create a sort of an intervention that could make a difference. And so, like, I'll use my own example, and I'll be kind of very honest about it. You know, I have never, ever applied for a bigger job. I have never gone through a promotion process. And yet I'm in a role where I'm, you know, leading sort of 5,000 people in an engineering role. And how did that happen? The only way it happened is because other people saw more in me than I saw in myself, and encouraged me and supported me. And I guess now you would probably use the word sponsored me to do that. And sometimes those examples of sponsorship can be quite small, but very pivotal. And I'll give you one example. You know, I started life as a software developer, loved writing code, and I was in this team. I was probably the most junior person in the team, the least experienced on the system. And the team leader was called Sarah, and she was going on holiday, and she said, "Trina, could you be my cover while I'm away for 2 weeks?" Oh my God, I was so terrified. I felt so intimidated. They were all like these men who were way more knowledgeable and way older than me, etc. And I was literally like, anyway, I did it. And that's one of the lessons, always take a chance on yourself. I did it, and I loved it. And it sort of opened up something in my mind that said, oh, there's other things that I can do. And then the same thing happened to me a number of years later with this guy called Paul, who was came in as an interim CIO. And he asked me to take on this role where I moved both sideways and up at the same time. So I went from running sort of software development for a kind of region to running infrastructure globally. And again, I was so terrified. And again, it was the best thing I ever did. It opened up pathways for me that I could never have opened up otherwise, and I would never have pushed myself for. And so the bit I'm kind of coming to your point around kind of what can people do, the bit I guess I'm coming to is like, what made the difference there was, firstly, people took the time to look at me and to see what might be in there that I didn't know, or even if I knew I wasn't kind of going to do anything about, or didn't know how to do something about. But also, they took a chance on me. They actually said, okay, we're going to take a chance on her. And from there, my career grew. I mean, you know, just those two examples alone might seem quite small in isolation, but had a huge influence on the level of experience I got, on the rooms that I was in, on the kinds of things I was involved in, and therefore kind of how I built my skills. And so what I say to people, whether it's you thinking about yourself, or you thinking about people who work for you, or you as an ally, or whatever it is, like, who are you going to take a chance on? Who are you taking a chance on right now? And who are you going to take a chance on tomorrow, next week, next month? Because those are the things in the real world that I think make a tangible difference. And if you think to yourself, oh, well, I don't really know anyone like that I think I could take a chance on, think again, because potential doesn't always look like you expect it to look like, right? It sometimes looks very different. And often those people who aren't pushing themselves forward often have this huge amount to give, but don't necessarily know how to. So that's my sort of passionate plea is take a chance on yourself, but take a chance on somebody else, or more than one person as well. It certainly made a huge difference to my career.
Mine too. How about you, JJ?
Yeah, I'd echo that. I mean, I probably could articulate a very similar story in terms of 2 or 3 people through my career. And actually, the first one, it was almost blind to me. It was almost unbeknownst. I got sponsored onto the first cohort. I left school at 16. I did my degree in my 30s, but I got sponsored by my manager at the time. He said, you're one of 15. This is at Barclays, huge organisation, probably over 100,000 at the time. You're one of 15 in the organisation going to do this degree course as part of the first cohort, sponsored by sort of one of the UK CEOs at the time. And I had no idea that I was even being considered, and that was categorically a turning point in my career. I hadn't asked for it. I didn't even know it existed. So, you know, I absolutely agree, and I think, you know, similarly have sponsored people through and think it's a really important way of, you know, spotting different talent and helping people on a path. I think one point to make around sponsorship and, you know, thinking about how you give people a chance, especially in the female context of elevating females within organisations, you need to make it meaningful so that that impact can be really clearly articulated. So, you know, there's a blurred line between a side project or actually something that can be demonstrable in terms of business impact, business outcome, that can then elevate that person's profile to support them, because it's not necessarily just one person. It's about what are other people saying about you when you're not in the room. And actually that sponsorship will take you so far, but also that impact needs to be more widespread in the very political organisations that we work in.
How about you guys as allies? And I guess, Peter, I want to start with you to just ask, do you think this sort of data AI world gives you more opportunities or new kinds of opportunities to do this sort of sponsorship or allyship?
I think because it's a new era, it's a new subject matter, then there's that excuse to broaden out horizons. But I think it's very insightful what you say, Trina. And I think that as an ally, as a leader, we've got to understand you have to actively look for those people you want to take a risk on. Yeah. Rather than assuming they're just going to filter up to the top and you'll be able to pick them out. I think we have to understand, I mean, almost you have to overcome an unconscious bias. You have to actually reset yourself and say people might be manifesting their potential, their opportunity in a completely different way. So you have to look harder. And I think that is something we have to take on. And I think that in a new world of AI and data science, perhaps it is a reset slightly anyway. I mean, I do see a lot of graduates coming through data science courses. A lot of my data science teams at Ultra, LNG, actually had a fair balance of diversity within them. And I think that we are seeing them coming through in the CVs. But even when you get them in the team, you have to then actively look for, who am I going to take a chance on? Rather than actually just going for the obvious candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be deliberate. I think certainly if I look at the makeup of my organisation, we've been investing very heavily in the early careers pipeline for many years, and so the gender diversity stats at the lower end of the organisation is looking really healthy and really good. As you come up the organisation, it definitely drops off, and so it's that transition that we need to be really deliberate about. And I think things like the sponsorship programs that we've put in place internally are helping. But yeah, I think all of us can probably pick moments out in our career where someone's taken a chance on us, and that sponsorship is absolutely key.
So I think what I'm hearing from you guys is it's a mix of programmatic approaches that the company leads, but also individual commitment. And I think in my career, even in the role I'm in now, when I interviewed for this role, my boss Faisal said, well, what about this part? And I said, I don't really have a lot of experience there. And he said, I don't either. Who's going to do that part? And I said, I don't know. I guess we'll figure it out. But he took a chance on me. And that loyalty that breeds, that willingness to work hard, comes with that somebody's sponsor be taking a chance to get, giving me an opportunity. So it's individual as much as it's programmatic, right? Okay, I'm conscious of time. It's flying by. We want to take some questions from all of you. And there's some microphones. And I will say this, because we're streaming and recording and things like that, please wait till the microphone gets to you to ask your question. But can anybody, it's always like nobody wants to go first. Anybody got a question in the audience? There's one. Can you pass that down? Thanks, guys.
Thank you. So I definitely relate to the sponsorship thing that you guys have been talking about, especially what you said, Trina. So I came from a mechanical engineering background. I never did computer science, and I had a placement in a solution architecture team. And I was in a very fortunate position where my boss, I guess, saw something in me, and I got a permanent role there, and I've been doing that since. But I think I would say that's a very rare scenario to get into, and not all the time are people so lucky to have someone willing to give that sponsorship.
Yeah.
So in the absence of that, what can we women as an individual do to make ourselves heard and, increase our progression rather than, doing that 5-year turn out of tech eventually?
So I'll maybe give two answers to that. So one is pretty much every organization now has a sort of a structure that says have a personal development plan. And I'll be honest with you, I never really did much about my personal development plan, which was my fault, my mistake, all that. But I would say, like, your people leader should be equipped to go through, to sit with you and spend time on your personal development plan. And I think when you take the initiative on that and you're really focused, and actually, ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever is a very good friend in building a personal development plan, get that out there. Get something structured and systematic that allows you to do the thinking, but also makes your people leader a partner in that with you. And what I always say to people is, like, think a bit further ahead. Like, let's say, like, what if this job came up in 5 years' time? What would make it easy for them to say yes to me? So if you're thinking a bit further ahead, and then work back and say, well, what am I missing? What kind of things, kind of experiences would I need to build? Or what kind of skills would I need to build? Or what kind of things would I need to try in order to be able to, in a position where it'd be easy for someone to say yes? And so I think that's a really good way of structuring your personal development plan. The other thing that has been a huge thing for me in my career is I suffered really badly from imposter syndrome, like really badly, for a very long time. And I probably didn't even know I did, but that, I think, was a big part of why I never, applied for bigger jobs or, pushed myself kind of forward. I, with the help of a coach, solved my imposter syndrome. and everyone solves it in their own, there's different mechanisms work for different people. But for me, that investment of time in actually solving my imposter syndrome made a huge difference to my ability to to push myself a bit more. So they'd be kind of two practical things that I would say. Because you're right, it doesn't always happen, right? Doesn't happen as often as it should, and that's why I'm sort of making this plea, this impassioned plea to say, take a chance on yourself and take a chance on somebody else, right? That I think that it scales quite quickly when you do that. Anything else to add from the others?
Just to add to that, I think I had a bit of a epiphany moment in my career where I realised actually I did have the permission to ask for what I wanted. When I was in banking in my very early 30s, I took a, for that time, relatively senior role. It took me 2 months of board meetings to speak in the board meeting, an internal board meeting. And I learnt a really important lesson as part of that where, I assumed that I was going to be positioned for this next thing. I was blind to sponsorship and all of that stuff then. But actually, the feedback from the regional director at the time was, well, no one had any idea. And so I think my coaching is actually think about what it is you want and find the courage to tell someone. So bake it into a personal, absolutely agree on the personal development plan, but alongside that, find the voice, and it takes everybody different amounts of time, but just find a way to actually really articulate and look for those projects and things that you can do to really demonstrate some impact or, like I talked around the sponsorship, find those things that you can really stand behind in terms of additional to the role that you're doing. Be my 2 suggestions.
And I guess if you don't feel like it's obvious who your sponsor might be today, then think about who do you want it to be in terms of who in your whether it's reporting line or whatever else you think could make a good sponsor, and also how could you get their attention, and that could be thinking about rather than what's your boss's biggest problem to solve, think about what your boss's biggest problem to solve is, and see if there's an opportunity to get involved in helping on that in some way. I think certainly some of the career steps that I've taken have been through doing that in terms of understanding what are the problems that the organisation has to solve and kind of throwing my hat in the ring. And that in turn, yes, it's taking a risk because if you do a good job, then great, you've got their attention, and then that sponsorship kind of relationship might develop. If it doesn't go so well, you've taken a risk, but you haven't lost anything. I think actively seek a sponsor out as well.
So I'm getting I'm going to close with you, Peter, and then we'll wrap it up after that.
I don't know what I could really add to that. I mean, that I think is fabulous advice. I think more general advice, it comes kind of on Gavin's thing, is like, why did I come here today? I want to share my experience and my knowledge and help people. But also, I'm going to learn a huge amount by coming today. One of the mantras I have in my life, you don't go, you don't know. Yeah. and 5 out of 10 of the goes might be a complete waste of time, but 5 might be right. You might network, you might meet people, you might pick up a new idea. And I said that to Heather from Kubrick the other day, and she bounced straight back at me and said, if you don't go, you don't grow. Oh. Mm-hmm. And I said, yes.
Yeah. And I think that's the hope is that we show up to these things. And I want to make sure we have plenty of time for people to network for that reason. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even if you take one relationship away from this or one bit of advice, that's why we do these things, and that's why I think we have these conversations. It's important, and I think we get caught up in our day-to-day sometimes, and we don't stop and be curious or reach out for sponsorship or ask questions or challenge ourselves, right? So I'm going to ask for one answer on this, and then I promise I'll cut us off, guys. Fast forward 3 years. We gather together in this room as a group. What do you think will be different, or could be different, and what's one bit of advice to get us there? And I'll ask one or two of you to answer that.
I think 3 years is a fairly short period of time when we've been kind of discussing the real kind of structural challenges that haven't necessarily been solved over kind of decades, but things are moving really quickly. So I think roles are changing, how we interact with technology is changing, how we go about doing our day jobs are changing. So I think actually things could look really quite different in 3 years' time. We've all got at LSEG an objective to make sure that we've got a learning and development objective around AI. So I think everyone's roles are going to be impacted. I think in terms of the topic around gender, I think we need to really focus on being deliberate around improving on the diversity, particularly at the senior end of the organisation.
I'd like to see more women founders in data and AI in 3 years. I think there's a kind of, I think you used the word nexus earlier. There's this kind of moment we're in where things can change. I'd love to see at least a few people out of this room being founders in data and AI. Wouldn't that be exciting?
I'm meeting one on Friday, and I'm super excited to talk to her. She started a company 5 years ago, and it's just booming, and I love that. I love it. I like that. Let's stop there. I want to say, first of all, thank you to the LSEG team for hosting us here. This is a great space. Thank you to the Synechron team who prepared everything down to my note cards, right? I love that. Thank you for organizing everything. Thank you to all of you for taking the time to be with us today. We have a gift that we'll pass out to you later, but thanks for taking the time and for joining us in the conversation. I think my last plea to all of you, right? Keep the conversation going and take the time. Go online. You can tag us at Synechron EmpowHer, WINTech. Please spread the word, right? And keep the conversation going. Don't just let it stop here. And thank you all for taking the time to join us this morning. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.